All right, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to give everybody a little bit more time to filter in. It always takes a minute or two for everybody to come off out of the weight room and into the main room. Good morning, everyone. I'm Graham Dufault, General Counsel of Act.at Association. And if you were looking for Brazil and the Brink, DMA is at the door. You're at the right place. This is a discussion that we're going to host here on the Digital Markets Act and its potential spread over to Brazil and other parts of the world. So thank you again for joining us. We're super fortunate here. We have Mitchel Volkering, who is a founder of Vaic.at and one of our member companies, to join us. And he's a member company of ours that's based in the Netherlands, so has some first-hand experience with European regulation generally, and in particular has some really interesting insights on the Digital Markets Act. And so, yes, there are a lot of different kinds of regulatory frameworks we could be talking about today. But we are going to focus in a little bit on the Digital Markets Act. Basic outline on this framework is that it's sort of a public utility style set of requirements and prohibitions. It's imposed on certain online marketplaces and platforms. It imposes sort of a must carry of all business users content type of approach, and then a prohibition on preferencing the platform's own offerings. So I always think of that as belts and suspenders, no self-preferencing on your own platform, and also you must carry. Of course, there are some limited exceptions that we can talk a little bit about, but in general, that's the overarching approach that's imposed via DMA. And the problem that ACT members have always had at a high level is that sort of the value that in general they get from these marketplaces is derived from their ability to remove bad actors and to curate the content, to curate the marketplace. It's the value that a lot of individual consumers get from these marketplaces as well. It sort of ensures that people want to come back, and it's a way of competing with other marketplaces. And so we will talk a little bit with Mitchel about that. And so illegalizing that kind of value in the marketplaces and in the platforms is just something that we've always sort of pushed back on. We've cautioned against other jurisdictions taking on similar frameworks, and it sort of goes against what we have seen as the democratization of entrepreneurship and the ability to sort of get going quickly with a package of services that is complementary or offered along with just bare distribution of whether that's software, durable goods, or other kinds of services like advertising. So jurisdictions around the world are considering enacting versions of DMA. That includes Brazil. And some of them think it will help rather than hurt small business innovators. And fortunately, though, some policymakers are super aware of the costs associated with making way for DMA-style frameworks. And we're fortunate that one of those policymakers, Congressman Scott Fitzgerald, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on the Administrative State Regulatory Reform and Antitrust. I always shorten that to the Subcommittee on Antitrust, but that's they have a broader purview than just that. And he has recorded some remarks for this webinar, and he's really led the charge on this issue. He's held hearings as recently as a couple of weeks ago, shining a spotlight on the potential harms of DMA. And we view him as Congress's leader on sensible sort of antitrust and competition policy, along with full committee chairman Jim Jordan and others that are kind of joining in the fight here. So with all of that said, what I was going to do was start up those recorded remarks and let him share some insights on what the subcommittee has been up to. And then we will be right back with you.
Hello, everyone. This is Congressman Scott Fitzgerald. I want to thank ACT for hosting this webinar at a crucial time for competition law in the digital space. It is vindicating to know that small businesses are perhaps even more concerned about the Digital Markets Act, or DMA, than their large rivals and business partners. I first became acquainted with ACT when they hosted a DMA roundtable for the House Judiciary Committee's congressional delegation trip to Europe in August of 2025. There, my colleagues and I heard directly from ACT members based in Europe and the UK about how DMA harms them. The takeaways were clear. America innovates, China replicates, and Europe regulates. As your association members noted at the roundtable, the Digital Markets Act is failing Europe. Former Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi stated in his report that the EU's regulatory stance towards tech companies hampers innovation. As a result of the DMA, consumers are left with fewer choices and less innovative products. Small and medium-sized businesses across Europe are reporting declines in online traffic and sales. Startup investment has chilled, and Europe is left on a weaker footing to compete with rival countries in areas like artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, some jurisdictions are not hearing these warnings loudly enough. Despite the repeated failures of these ex-ante style regulations, policymakers in countries like Korea, Japan, Australia, and Brazil are debating their own measures that mirror the DMA. The European Union's approach to regulation is threatening to eat the world, and I agree with ACT and its members that this is very bad news for consumers and small businesses around the globe. I've used my subcommittee bully pulpit to caution these countries against following the EU's lead. In fact, I hosted a hearing in my subcommittee just last month to examine how Europe's Digital Markets Act is catching on overseas and what it means for innovation. I have also sent letters alongside Chairman Jordan to the governments of Korea and Brazil asking questions and expressing my concerns with their Digital Market Act regulations. But there's more that Congress and the Trump administration can do to continue to push back on these anti-American policies. First, we must speak with a single voice and reject DMA here in the U.S. and its spread to other jurisdictions. Our next step should be to pass my legislation, the Protecting U.S. Companies from Foreign Regulatory Taxation Act. The bill would ensure that DMA orders are not unfairly enforced against U.S. companies in U.S. courts. Finally, we should open investigations under the Section 301 of the Trade Act to ensure these policies, should they continue, are met with a measured U.S. response. While some countries have already enacted versions of the DMA, like Japan and Australia, it's not too late for Brazil, and I would continue to urge caution. Thanks to ACT for hosting this discussion, and I would look forward to working with all interested stakeholders to make sure competition laws at home and abroad live up to the promise of competition. Better outcomes for small businesses, competition, and consumers.
So I don't think I could have said it better myself, that there is a lot at stake when it comes to competition regulation. It seems like there is so much interest in regulating new technologies, regulating new technology markets, and for one reason or another, folks overseas, here in the U.S. as well, are looking at competition law as an avenue for that. And so it certainly is a trend. And for our member companies in particular, it does represent a pretty serious threat. So I think that, Mitchel Volkering here is there's nobody better to talk about this, I don't think, as a dual citizen of Brazil and the Netherlands with a company that's based in The Hague. And so I think, you're just uniquely positioned to talk about these issues. So I want to turn it over to you to just share a little bit about yourself, your journey as an entrepreneur, and your company, Vaic.at.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for inviting me on this event. This is very good. It's very good for us as a small business, and hopefully everyone listening can hear our perspective. So thank you so much for that. My name is Mitchel Volkering, indeed. I have a company called Vaic.at, started about 10 years ago as a recruitment business. We help people find a new job. That is how it started. That's still what we're doing. We're just doing a little bit more stuff, advanced stuff around it to help people find the right place within Europe, for example. EU talent mobility is a big topic for us. Housing mobility, hopefully help highly skilled people find housing in the places where they need to be in Europe. And we're planning to do the same in Brazil. Obviously, that's just amazing because I'm Dutch and I'm Brazilian, so I have in those both worlds I can start doing this. What is interesting, I think, about all of this is that we process a lot of private data to make this happen. And I think that is very interesting, is very much connected to DMA and DMA-style regulation. And we will get into that later. But I think that is the main concern for us as a small business, is that if this data gets to other places that we cannot control, it becomes very less easy for our customers and our candidates to trust us with that information.
So there's a sort of a trust that you lean on with the iOS, with Android, with the app stores, and with the operating systems, where
Yeah.
people feel comfortable using those ecosystems, and therefore they're more likely to trust your company when you're processing their information on the platform.
Yeah, this is true. So our apps, for example, are available on our website, but also, of course, in the app stores. What happens is, what we've noticed in our data on our end is that our customers, candidates, use our apps and like feel more comfortable like sharing data with the app in an app that is coming from the app store, from the Apple App Store, than on our own website. Even though it's the same company, it's the same app, it's the same, right? We're doing everything the same. What you see is that translation, if you look at revenue for small business, is also very much bigger in the App Store than anywhere else. This translates almost one-to-one, at least according to our data, with personal data. People trust our app a lot more than our website right now. So that is very interesting. And we have been digging into that. And it is just, well, obviously like the safeguards that Apple has put in place, but also the trust and the image that the App Store has.
So it's not just a perception; it's also sort of the measures that are taken at the App Store level and at the operating system level. And one of the things we observed with the Digital Markets Act is going back again to the self-preferencing ban, plus the mandate for open access to like the central resources, so like device features, operating system features, those types of things. Tend to cast a shadow over the measures that you're talking about. So app vetting, the ability to remove an app if it is collecting information that and then processing it in a way that does not comport with the privacy policy, things like that. Sort of, it can be sort of low-hanging fruit, right? And it's sort of just the basic management functions that you expect. But turning to Brazil, you have a piece of legislation. It's Bill 4.765/2025, and in many ways it does mirror the Digital Markets Act. It has the sort of the same overarching framework. It is a sort of an ex ante regulatory framework that it would enact. And late last year, we were especially worried when we had heard that the House of Representatives in Brazil was looking to fast track the legislation. And instead of immediately going to a vote, they didn't quite do that. They decided to kick the legislation to a special committee. and they have not named the members of the committee yet, as far as I am aware. But once they do, that will trigger a 60-day clock. So they would have 60 days to review the legislation, with an option for a 30-day extension, and then they would issue a recommendation to the full chamber. We recommend this bill, or we recommend voting it down and not taking it up. And oftentimes, what seems to be the case is that when a special committee like this is convened, then the full legislature will go with the recommendation. And so this is the right time to be talking about this, when you have a shot clock, when you have a limited amount of time for the special committee, once it's named, to consider this legislation. And so, the perfect time for folks in Brazil and in the U.S. To be hearing about what concerns and the experiences. So, as it's being implemented in Europe, like, wonder if you could share a little bit about, what's Brazil's tech ecosystem like? How would it be affected with something as dramatic as Bill 4.765 being enacted?
Yeah, so we have been doing extensive research on how the Brazilian market works, and what we see is that almost everyone engages with the digital world in Brazil through their phone. They love phones, they have phones. Everyone engages through like that portal with the digital world, almost, right? Almost everyone. And that makes sense in like how obviously like the amount of choice that they have, like Android, iOS, right? They can find something that they would like. Legislation like this would probably limit that choice, and also it will open up all sorts of private data access to third parties that are most consumers expect them not to have. Which in Brazil, again, since the foundation is mobile first, that would change the entire digital market fundamentally. It is already bad in the EU, as we can see. I mean, the DMA has basically like turned every little piece of enforcement into like a geopolitical battle. And that is like something that I would say, for us as a small business, it's not helpful, because the trust in these stores is something that gets transmitted to like our app. And if for example, Apple can't do these enforcement because they don't know what to expect in terms of answers from the EU or Brazil or Korea, whatever, that means that consumers are going to be like, wait, but I expected you to do something about this. And now, can I still trust Mitchel if you can't do something about someone else, if that makes sense? So I think the freedom for these platforms to be able to enforce their rules is very important, and legislation like this for the platform is not helpful. For the trust in the platform is not helpful, and then for us as a small developer is just harmful. It's not even not helpful; it's just harmful.
It goes that far. I mean, I want to dig in on two themes that you touched on, which are first point, which is that you mentioned that consumers have this choice of sort of a more open model in the mobile ecosystem, and Android a little bit more of a closed model with iOS. Let's draw that out a little bit. So DMA would flatten out those choices. How would it do that, and what's lost with removing that choice?
Well, I think on both Android and iOS, there are safety and security features that will be lost, like the inherent right to background processes and Wi-Fi networks and stuff like that. Right now, a lot of that is protected on both platforms.
Right.
Then, if you would branch out of that, you would see that there is a little bit more, I think, tinkering and stuff that you can do on Android versus the more curated side of iOS, which I think that, in terms of consumer preference, you can pick which one you like the most. With something like the DMA, which is something that you start seeing in the EU, you kind of like have just, it's not as simple as that, but basically you get similar systems, more similar systems, and the amount of choice, it just gets reduced. So in terms of like being able to just say, hey, I like the more curated stuff, or I like the
Yeah.
more being able to tinker with stuff. That that just becomes like one big bucket, more and more.
So
Yeah,
that's interesting because I think what at first blush, it looks like DMA creates more choice because it forces the acceptance of uncurated content onto a single platform. So maybe there's a little bit more choice on one platform, but people forget that there is a choice in marketplace itself, and that
yeah,
marketplaces are competing with each other to get individuals on the one side of the market and then trying to compete to get developers on the other side.
yeah, absolutely. And that is by extent. This is by far not even the only issue with DMA, to be fair, but it is a
Right.
big one, especially for consumers and for developers. It even especially like right, that is the biggest digital market in Brazil, the mobile developers market. Um, Having delayed access to some of the features on these platforms to develop on top of is also a big issue. But I guess like I'm
Yeah.
going off topic a little bit, but this is like there are so many things that I feel like are so harmful to small businesses. Um, yeah, I can have this event all day.
Let's talk about that delay because I know that there are some features, for example, real-time translation in AirPods, Apple Intelligence,
Yeah,
Google searches AI feature at the top of search recommendations and search results. Those are the overview, Google overview. Um, those were delayed in rolling out in part because you have DMA provisions that would apply and would require the designated gatekeeper, as they're called in DMA parlance, to take some measures to make them more open before they are rolled out in
yeah,
areas where DMA applies. Um, and so let's talk a little bit about that issue because
yeah.
I think for some folks they looked at and say, well, it's a little bit of a delay, but is that really a big deal? Um, I think I know what some of our other member companies would say, but I want to hear from you, and a little bit about what you shared at that roundtable that Chairman Fitzgerald alluded to in Brussels.
Yeah, that is definitely like a very big topic because maybe well something that literally happened like last worldwide developers conference. It's a conference from Apple. Apple announced a couple of things, and we were in this giant group chat with a few American developers, a few European developers, Brazilian developers, all over the world. It's global, right? Um, and the differences in replies to everything was so interesting. It's like US developers were like, oh, let me just download the developer beta, let me get started, and let me port or enhance some of the features that I have, see if I can test it, see if I can do it, right? That was the first response after seeing some of the things announced. That would be very helpful for developers. In Europe, the same people in the same chat were saying, well, let's check the fine print and see if we will have access to these tools. And well, we saw that some of the tools, this is happening for a couple of years, but some of the tools will have 6 months of delays, or we don't even know if it would be coming to our side of
You don't
the
even know
world,
if it will.
which
Yeah.
means that
Yeah.
you're waiting, right? These are AI models, these are on-device language models to make sure that, right, again, private data stays on device even though it's still inferencing. All of these very unique tools that we do want to use, we have to wait. So our first response is like, let's see if it becomes available. And then our competitors in the United States, and I guess everyone else that doesn't have this legislation breathing in their neck, will just say, okay, let's get started. Yeah. So I think,
So they get a head start
yeah,
on you. And we actually did a survey. It was kind of a long survey of not necessarily member companies of ours, but companies that are under 250 employees in the EU, the UK, and then we had a separate survey in the US. And one of the things we asked them was, um, you know, did you experience a delay in the rollout of a new AI model or AI related feature in your jurisdiction? And for those that were in the EU and the UK, the average response to that question was, yes, it cost us around $109,000 to $375,000 a year, which is derived from a combination of lost cost savings because they were planning on using the tool to help them with day-to-day management of the business, or along the lines of what you were just describing, we're way behind the American competitor. We lost the client.
Yeah,
So you lose
exactly.
one client. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, especially in recruitment. I mean, I
Right.
wouldn't. I'm not going to tell any specifics, but that's like right. One candidate is a lot of money. And this is some of the things that it's not just AI. AI is a very big component and it's there. But there are other components that were also delayed, that we feel like, especially in Europe. I mean, live translation, for example. This is just something. It's a very unique tool, especially in Europe with so many different languages, and it
I'm sure you've
was,
seen
yeah,
the issues with that as you try to facilitate mobility across Europe. You probably have seen firsthand a little bit of frustration there with not being able to use real-time translation. Wouldn't that be nice for folks that are trying to make the move to a new country?
yeah, yeah. That amazing, something like that. Um, but this is, and you said it correctly. It's a very big issue with DMA, and then DMA combined with all sorts of other legislation here in the EU
Mhm.
makes it even worse because other tools are also delayed. It's unfortunate.
So at a high level, let's draw it out just a little bit. You know, going back to so Article 6.5 is this prohibition on self-preferencing. You
Mm,
couple that with mandates to provide open access to like you mentioned background processing, for example.
mm, yeah.
And we can get into that. But so at a high level, because there are little differences, right, between all the different frameworks that are popping up. And for
Mm,
example, Brazil, one thing that stands out is it's a little bit more like the UK's version of DMA, which is called the DMCCA, not to throw too many acronyms out there. But it gives a little bit more flexibility. Now, to the regulator, to determine, the types of things that are going to be prohibited and all those types of things. And so if you look at the structure of DMA, right, first you designate, you try to designate a company as owning a designated gatekeeper, a platform that provides, central services. And I always think of the online marketplaces. Search is another example, but of the online marketplaces as well. And because it's set up so that you first designate a gatekeeper, the regulations themselves and the implementation itself is fit for the specific company, right? That is designated as a gatekeeper. So there's this like one paragraph, Article 6.5, that says no self-preferencing in, listing things.
mm,
Now, as you implement that, as it applies specifically to a given gatekeeper, all these new details start to emerge in what the Director General of Competition, DG Comp, the body at the European Commission, will extrapolate out from the broad prohibition. That process has proven to be really difficult and uncertain because there is not really this requirement for the regulator to tell the regulated entity that owns the designated gatekeeper whether their compliance plan meets the requirements, because
mm,
they're kind of in the air and they're being developed as you go along. You alluded to
yeah.
this, it was in some of the initial comments. So it's like, how does that uncertainty affect you across all the different ways that DMA is being implemented now?
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that the regulators are missing, is that we are in between them and the gatekeepers that they're targeting.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
um, they like I feel like we are in years of sending letters back and forth and all sorts of meetings, and still it seems like they either forgot about us or didn't really notice that we are still in between that. And this is with all these changes, right? It's similar to industry standards, like a commission structure that is just industry standard, and then now they're trying to figure out for, I guess, almost I don't know, 2 years what the new structure is going to be, because they're trying to force it in some sort of direction. But then me as a small business, I don't know where I am at. I don't know where I'm at in this jurisdiction or the next, because it's all going to be different. And like you said, some of the things can change at any moment. So because there's apparently a lot of flexibility that some of these policymakers grant to the enforcement process. Yeah, well, tomorrow it could be different. I mean, the DMA has revisions of top revisions and top revisions of like extra layers that they put on top of, with, like, for example, these Wi-Fi network things. And just for a developer with a small team that just wants to develop, this is just not a really good like environment to be in right now. This is just not. It's not. What we want to do is we want to help Europeans find a home, find a job, find study opportunities. We help. We have a platform called EU Origin, where you get a giant map with all sorts of innovative solutions that have been created and built in Europe. You can learn from it. That's what we want to build. That's what we want to do. And now we are reading legislation to find out where we are at, and it changes every few weeks.
One area in particular where we're seeing a lot of back and forth is, this is Article 5.4, and nobody has to memorize these, but the basic gist of it is the fee structure on the stores and other marketplaces. So, without DMA, the fee structure on app stores is there is imposed a commission on digital only goods and services being transacted. And so think about buying the app itself, video or gaming, so video games. So if you want to buy a new skin for your character or buy a loot box inside the game, that's a digital only transaction and therefore subject to the commission. And then things like online dating. So you go to the Match app and you want to buy the ability to communicate, and that's a digital only transaction. And so those are charged 15%, unless the developer is making over $1 million a year, in which case it is going to be in some cases 30%. And the way it all works out is that less than 1% of developers pay that full 30%. And I think that part of the reason, DMA has gained purchase is that folks get information that leads them to believe that everybody has to pay 30% just to have an app on the store. And that's just not true. And so that's where provisions like 5.4 come from, is, hey, it's really not fair that some of these developers have to pay that kind of a commission. And in the meantime, the app stores are trying to come up with, hey, let's come up with a fee structure that might meet the requirements of the DMA and of the regulators' expectations under DMA. And that has been a really shifting goalpost type situation. So what's your thought on how that has all played out, and the fee structures and all of it?
Yeah, I like you said, like less than 1% of the App Store actually gets to that point where they have to, I guess, pay the 30%. Now that for some reason that sparked this. Well, it's a big part of what sparked this entire debate. Whilst 99%, including myself, we pay €100, I guess, a year, and we have full distribution and IP protection and support in terms of APIs, building the apps, all sorts of things. Like it doesn't make much sense to put so much. Like, I'm not sure if people see the scale of what is happening. Like, there is an entire office building almost of policymakers, lawyers, and like I think it's DG Comp, the DMA officers, like an insane operation that has been running for a really long time. And obviously, it's doing more than just the app stores, but it was partially for that. And it has been sparked by less than 1% of the app stores. The rest of the 99% were sitting around, and I guess like we're like, yeah, let's see what happens. But we don't have the scale to like some of these bigger companies, the competitors of the gatekeepers, to actually say like, okay, we're just gonna build an app store alternative, or we're just going to build a I don't know, an entire payment system or stuff like that. Like all of these things, they sound like, I guess in a perfect world where there are no malicious actors and there are no scammers or malware makers, right? But we're not living there. We're living in this world where we have, well, people doing stuff and adversarial countries doing stuff, and there's a lot going on, especially for this year in this time period. So, taking all of these risks, I don't think it's a good idea.
And how much do you think is sort of folks have a little bit taken for granted the measures that have been taken and the ability to rely on a secure payment, system? How much of that do you think is at play here? We sort of take those protection measures for granted and not really appreciating what you're losing if you prohibit those measures. We may have lost Mitchel. Let me double check here. I'll be right back.
Sorry, hey, I don't know what happened. Hi. I don't know what happened. It froze on my end, and then, yeah.
Oh no!
Could you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay,
we were
sorry
just,
about that.
We were just talking through. No, hey, glad to have you back. So sorry, folks, for the momentary glitch there, but we were just talking through sort of the what people sort of have come to expect on a mobile ecosystem, a secure payment processing, facility, the ability to, get paid back if there was an accidental charge, for example, those types of things that, again, those are sort of in the crosshairs of that provision of DMA we were just talking about. So how much of that do you think it's because folks have come to take that stuff for granted a little bit and are not really aware of what they're losing out on by prohibiting those measures?
Yeah, I would say so, especially in the context of Europe, but worldwide. I mean, in Europe, we have consumer protection laws that would require someone to have a refund, I guess, within 14 days if purchase was done from a distance, including digital goods. But try and explain that to someone, right, in a completely different jurisdiction. Try to explain that to their support email. You're not going to get there. They're going to be like, well, it's all good, right? And in the App Store, you can just, I guess with about 3 taps, you can report an issue and say, hey, I this is a charge that I do not recognize, or a charge that has happened accidentally and I want it back. And the App Store will just enforce that consumer protection law in Europe. So these are things that obviously contribute to consumer trust. So that is good for me as a small developer, because a consumer will be looking at our apps and they're like, okay, I like this premium feature. Maybe they did a mistap, or I don't know, something can happen, but they know that they can get their money back if that happens, even if I might not see their email or whatever. I'm in a different jurisdiction. Doesn't matter. These are the laws, and App Store will enforce that. And that is something that you will lose out on if you go with alternative payments. And
if you require them to be on the platform, as opposed to, not having that sort of open access mandate. There's a lot of parallels too with retail goods distribution, where on the Amazon marketplace you have the return policies and like all of the features that come along with being a prime seller. So you have access to fulfillment by Amazon with this, which is a commitment for 2 day shipping, right? So you commit to 2 day shipping. Fulfillment by Amazon is really good. They have a very good network there. And because DMA sort of treats that as potentially a pretext to harm competition because it's provided by the platform itself, now that is at risk. And now you're talking about 2 day shipping, which has become a real convenience that in the US, if you have a Prime account, and even if you don't have a Prime account, you can pay extra for that 2 day shipping. The fact that it has been brought about is a great thing, and I think very quickly people have started to take it for granted and say, we can really tinker with this stuff and prohibit its provision by Amazon, so that somebody else can do it. And it's like it's not that simple. You can't just like throw away that incredible amount of investment that's gone into that that kind of service, just because it's provided by a big company that also manages the marketplace and has a
Yeah.
reason to bring people back to the marketplace. So
Yeah.
some parallels there with software, says it because we get so focused on the software distribution, but there's also, in some of our member companies, use retail marketplaces for distributing like the hardware they make, and
Yeah.
so we have a strong interest in making sure that all of this doesn't just go away because we don't, there are folks that have issues with the companies that are providing it.
Yeah.
So I think that is animating some of it too, by the way, is that there's a political benefit taken on certain kinds of companies. And I think that is at least a little bit at play in the United States, where there is a version of DMA being discussed, which is not it's not quite the same as European DMA. It's more of an Americanized version. It's more of like an amendment to the Sherman Act and American competition law that nonetheless has the same really broad prohibitions on conduct by online marketplaces, online platforms, where there's curation of content, curation of the product. It's called the American Innovation and Choice Online Act, or ACOA, and we have the same concerns with ACOA as we've always had with DMA and its mirror versions in other countries. And so, curious what your overarching advice would be to American policymakers that are considering a framework like ACOA. What's an overarching couple of takeaways for Americans looking at this kind of thing?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I think that once you have innovators and developers and people reading fine prints to check how long they have to wait before they can take action on some new innovation, you're doing it wrong. And it sounds like if some sort of translation of the DMA would come to the United States, that's exactly what you would get. People are gonna be slowed down, and ironically, I would say that customers would probably go to the big platforms because they can still navigate all that and still release stuff on a fast basis because they have the people to get it done. So I think it would have a worse effect. It would have a bad effect. And I guess if you look at how it's going in Europe right now, all these promised benefits for small businesses, we are not able to find them yet. I have spoken to many other developers that haven't been able to find them yet. I guess there are a few very big multi-billion-dollar companies that are benefiting, and great, I guess. But
Right.
yeah, I wouldn't say that's it's a good
Well, it's
good idea.
like for a lot of our members and small businesses that are on the newer side are looking toward a multi-billion-dollar valuation someday, but they're not there yet, right? They're on it.
Yeah.
And so what you're describing is sort of like, if you're the US and you're looking at a DMA style intervention, it's not going to help those companies that are on their way up, but it will help certain companies that are looking to, for example, that are really looking to reduce their distribution costs, right? They don't want to
Yeah.
pay, right? They don't want to pay the 30%. So a legislative legal mechanism that prohibits the charging of that or requires the platform to allow them to circumvent the fee would be ideal, right? And nobody blames a company that's at that size and that's looking for ways of reducing their distribution costs. That is
Mm.
sort of a rational thing to do. But what policymakers have to probably understand is what the effect is going to be on smaller companies that are trying to get to that stage.
Yeah, I would say so, and I also think that um, whilst it's kind of like natural behavior for a company to say like let's reduce any cost, it is also like there are industry standards, and it is also helping an entire ecosystem of small
Mhm.
businesses to be able to just distribute their apps for like $100 or euros in my case.
Right.
So it is an entire system, and if certain parts are going to be picked out of it in some sort of cherry picking basis, I think the other stuff will also fall apart for people that like ourselves that are trying to grow to that stage, hopefully. Um, so I don't I guess it's just not a great idea to have this much enforcement going on that market. I think it is way better to communicate with all stakeholders, including small businesses. That is something that I would prefer, and and find some middle ground. Yeah.
So, and what I'm picking up too is that you've been a little bit frustrated with in Europe the weight with which regulators take your comments. So it's sort
Yeah.
of what has that process been like? Because I know that they have like a formal process for weighing in, but having seen it from my vantage point, it doesn't look like it's designed to actually take things in. It's just sort of designed to check a box. Is that what your
Yeah.
experience as somebody who's participated in those processes been like?
Yeah, it has felt like that, and actually, thanks to ACT, we went to the European Commission
Right.
about a year ago. We had a good conversation, and I feel like it was very productive, actually.
Hmm.
But then afterwards, when I tried to reference back to it or into I think they call these workshops. Unfortunately, it feels like that it hasn't been taken into account. And again, it's not just me. We went there with an entire group of ex members of small businesses to talk about this. I gave them an example. Maybe it's going to be a little bit too technical, but let's say there is a company with a third party glass system that you have to you can use and connect to your iPhone. Well, that would mean that now under these new provisions under the DMA, the company behind those glasses can see the Wi-Fi networks, can see background processes, notifications. So if I send the candidate a notification of like, hey, company X, Y, and Z wants to have a interview with you, right? Congratulations. Now that other company, the third party, could potentially see that as well. And they can also see if they went to that interview because my candidate logged into the guest Wi-Fi. And they can also see if they got hired because now they're connecting consistently every single week or every single day of the week, work week, to that same Wi-Fi or not. And then they can sell ads against that information, targeting the candidate that I'm trying to help find a new job. So I've given all of these examples, and unfortunately, the response that I get back is very, I guess, it almost feels automated. They kind of say, "Well, we take it into consideration, and thank you so much, and it's so much appreciated." And you get almost the same message every single time. Yeah.
So that's unfortunate. So part of the advice for Brazil and for other jurisdictions would be have these interactions be more meaningful. And
Yeah.
even before you get to a point where you're looking at a framework like this, and do your best to take in what the small businesses experience has been thus far with implementation of DMA, so that you don't find yourselves imposing the same costs. And the privacy issue is especially important, right? Like, I think there is not enough weight given to the privacy and security risks of openness mandates that are this sweeping and that pop up, that are a central feature of the versions of DMA, of every version of DMA that we have seen, including ACOA. And so that has to be understood, and it also has to be understood how smaller companies are a little bit more sensitive to that risk than bigger companies that can absorb the risk a little bit better. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I hope that this is a good signal again to everyone in the US that some of this stuff is just really sensitive and really it could potentially be dangerous. For some companies, it could literally just be like something that, okay, we might have to venture into something else, or maybe just stop, right?
Right.
So I would say
a good policy
yeah,
outcome.
yeah, that's not a good policy outcome. So yeah.
So you alluded to this a couple of times, just to drill down on it before we get to the wrap up phase, is that one of the requirements there in the way it's being implemented on iOS, for example, is to provide open access to background runtime. Runtime being processing power, and the way mobile devices are set up is that the operating system does manage access to background processing, because if it were just first come, first serve, then whichever app has the most demands on the phone gets potentially the entire, the entire thing. And that, like, if you're a really big company and you can, benefit from imposing those kinds of demands on an iOS device, then that's, again, get back to our point, like, it really helps these really big companies. That's great for you to be able to just like offload all the computing and not have to like have a separate computing dealio for like a pair of glasses, for example. So what's the risk there of allowing that sort of like first come, first serve setup?
Yeah, like that would potentially just push my app, for example, to a point where it would slow down, right? If someone else is taking up all of that compute or runtime, then our app, even though it will probably launch, it will be very slow, or it might crash, or other things that we have taken into account that would be in a normal sense acceptable. It might not be, because something else is taking up a lot of resources. Which, I mean, I don't know. Like there are some really inspiring trends going on, like vibe coding, for example, which is something that might tie into this, where everyone is getting involved, and this is very cool. It's happening in Europe, it's happening in the United States, it's happening in Brazil, it's happening everywhere, because it's just beautiful. But then one of the things that is, of course, a little bit risky is if you don't fully understand some of the things that are happening on the back end or in these runtimes facilities, and it just breaks the experience and potentially crashes the app, which is why you have app review, which is why you have the app store, right? A lot of these web coders are running into
like what's the demand on the battery going to be, what, in the background, right?
Yeah, this is one of the interesting parts, is that now you have entire agents looking at, like, okay, so how can we actually make agents are parts of a coding, let's say, AI system to help it understand what it needs to do and how to do it. There are now entire agents to make sure that everything stays optimized and everything stays in its memory, doesn't have memory leaks, doesn't have security leaks, and all sorts of things. But one of them is also like the App Store guidelines, and all of these things are happening at the same time. But it is very important to have someone that checks these things before they end up on someone's an average consumer screen. So if you would have any third party that has access to runtime, if they make a little hardware device or not, that would make it a very bad situation right now.
So it's both the indirect, like, you affect the experience that the user has with the device overall,
Yeah,
and now you can sort of degrade that experience. So there's that indirect, and then there's the direct issue of like, can my app run at the same time, or is it just going to crash?
yeah,
Um, if device B is allowed to just take up all of the processing power on the device.
yeah, potentially, yeah, for sure. And this is, I get that other third parties
Hmm.
want to use a lot of the iPhone resources for their third
Sure.
party
Yeah.
accessory, but um,
Yep.
we also want the resources to have our apps running
Yeah.
on a solid device.
And you don't
Yeah,
necessarily have enough lawyers in Brussels to make it happen via the regulatory process at DG Comp.
yeah, no, no. Unfortunately, we're a small company, so
Yeah.
we're focusing on building these experiences because we love the places where we operate in. We love the places that we get to help, the people that we get to help, which includes Europe, which includes Brazil, which includes the United States.
Right.
So we love all these places, and having to focus on stuff like regulation and fine prints and having access to certain tools, yes or no.
Hmm.
Again, we are still looking for the benefits of the DMA here in Europe for us as a small business. And
And those
yeah,
have not materialized yet.
no, no, I
And
don't know.
you're not holding your breath. But so a good thing, but that brings us to a good point to end on, which is that there's an open docket in Europe now, looking at expanding the scope of potential designated gatekeepers under DMA to include AI platforms, so like the models. And so that is you have to think about it in that context as well. Um, is that something that is in mind with some of these other jurisdictions looking at doing DMA? So any thoughts there on, because we've always seen it through the lens of like, well, there's an AI feature that may be added to a gatekeeper, but that's going to have to be completely open, so they have to re-engineer it before it gets introduced in Europe. But now they're looking at potentially doing it with the AI systems themselves. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this will most likely again slow down our access to these tools, and this is. Am I still on track? Can you hear me? Oh,
I
okay,
I I
something
glitched
happened.
for a second. That was
Oh,
mine.
okay, okay, cool.
Sorry.
Um, no worries at all. But this will again, yeah. We had a period in time where even the AI Act was doing some of these things already, and now on top of the DMA, on top of that, that will be the DMA looking into the AI side of things. Um, but yeah, all of these gatekeepers now have to spend I don't know thousands of engineering hours into retooling and re-engineering these tools to fit in the DMA,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
naturally going to lead to delays. And then we're sitting around here waiting for these forced extra engineering hours to be completed at the gatekeeper, or we can build it ourselves, which we don't have the capacity to do so right now. So the most efficient way is to have the same access to all the tools as everyone worldwide has, as the people in the United States do. Yeah.
So that's a great thought to end on, but just to wrap up, want to say again, thank you so much, Mitchell, for sharing these insights. For everybody
Thank you.
who is listening in and who's watching the recording, please follow Mitchell on Twitter, X Volkering.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get it. You delete the E from his last name, and you got his handle, Volkring. And
True.
please, please follow us too. We're Act Online, or actonline.org is our website. Check that out. Mitchell has a lot of ongoing. I don't know how you have time and mental capacity to do it, Mitchell, but um, there's a lot of commentary and really, really high quality thinking that he does on the regulatory environment in Europe and what it means globally. And so, and for small businesses in particular. So please follow him, follow us. And we hope to see you on there. We also have a podcast every now and then, Tech Swamp, that I invite you all to check out. You can access it on the website. Thanks also, before we leave, to Chairman Fitzgerald and the subcommittee team, the personal office team, for enabling him to provide his insights. That was incredible, and for the leadership in Congress on this. And thanks to you all in the audience who has followed along all this way and on our journey here. We look forward to working with you. Please give me a shout, gdefault@actonline.org, or look us up on the website, like I said. And we will see you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.